Hi, this is Don. I was recently having a really nice conversation with students from SCAD, and we started talking about everything from sketchbooks to concept drawings. And I thought I would do a little video to talk about concept sketches. And really, it's sort of my perspective on them. Everybody has their own take on it, but the way in which I approach concept sketching. Here's a big old stack of probably about 2 years worth of work that I've been doing at Mighty Coconut on the walkabout mini golf courses. And I'll just sort of go through some of them. I certainly won't get through the whole thing. One of the realities when you're a concept artist is that a lot of your work is done under a non-disclosure agreement, so that it's work that the client sees and it's work that informs the finished product, but it's not work that you can necessarily share. So one of the nicest things about working on these virtual reality mini golf projects has been that I am allowed to show all my concept work after we release a new course, which is not something I can necessarily do when I finish doing a theme park project. So for me, concept design is, rather than it being sort of art with a capital A, it's an illustration of intent. It's a communication tool that's used to help other people see where your head is going or the direction you want to go in as far as the design. But it's also sort of a selfish opportunity for the artist, the designer, to start learning about the things that they're designing. So sketches like this is stuff for the Venice project. Initially, I'll do these sort of brain dump sketches, and these are meant to help me understand little details. I will be looking online for pictures. I'll be studying the architecture, making observations as I go. And for me, sometimes the best way to make observations is to start to draw them out. Through the act of drawing, I start to better understand the overall aesthetic, especially when you're doing something based upon a real world place, or if you're working with an IP and you want to understand the design principles of that intellectual property. I'll go through that process. I do a lot of thinking when sketching, so whether it's a plan view or it's details, it's helping me better understand before I jump in on all the details, how a place works. And so these initial sketches are often done for me personally, internally, to better understand it. But of course, I'll share it with the team as I go. I'll also use things like Google Street View and go to the place, like go into Venice. I'll use the VR headset and basically stand in the street and look around and pause. I'll also use walkthrough videos on YouTube. There's wonderful resources where you can follow along as someone is slowly walking through some place in the world. And the act of sort of walking with them means you start to look around and you start to make observations. When it came to Venice, I did a lot of observing in that the architecture repeated itself a lot. It seemed like there was a lot of opportunities for complexity, and really the architecture in places like Paris and Venice do tend to reuse the shapes a lot. This is exploring various sort of Italian and Venetian shapes for potential shape language for the whole design. Illustrated here. Let's see. So I've got lots of sort of, we could do it like this, maybe we could do it like that. One of the things I like to point out too is that sometimes the act of drawing it is to allow the team to decide that's not the direction we want to go in. So I might do a bunch of drawings, will go, that's all right, but maybe we don't do this, we do another thing. So it's valuable in that process too. Here's some sketches I did for Around the World in 80 Days, which was just coming up with a lot of different airship ideas, sort of Jules Verne steampunky airships. In our interpretation, Around the World in 80 Days, we have an airship depot that's hanging at the top of the Eiffel Tower in the late 1800s, and it's surrounded by these airships that are waiting to take off, and we play golf around. And it was a lot of fun just coming up with a lot of different ways in which airships could be depicted. This particular one we called the 737. It was like the standard commuter airplane or airship. Yeah, more potential airship designs. And here's an example of that top of the Eiffel Tower having all these airships at the top. So it's a way for me to think about the design and the opportunities to get my head in the time frame or part of history when it's taking place. Think about details, more airship drawings. Did a lot of these. I actually spilled my coffee on these drawings at one point, so that's a bummer. Oops, and here's a copy from the one I did that with. We'll explore graphics. I'm not a graphic designer, but I work with Zach Alexander, who's our graphic designer on all of our projects. And sometimes it's helpful if I just take a pass at a potential direction, and these will be scanned in and they'll actually be used in the models as placeholder graphics. So we always just call them placeholder graphics. Zach will be doing the final designs. And sometimes he'll riff off of what I've given him, and other times he'll just come and create his own design and aesthetic. So, like I said, concept designs are meant as a way in which to communicate an idea to a team so that they can understand the direction of the design. But for me, it's also a way to sort of pre-build these things in my head, because I know that in a lot of cases I'll be building the very first version of the model for these. So through observation, and observation through my hand onto a piece of paper, means that I can start to think about how these things might be constructed. There's also opportunities to do these vignette sketches that will sort of explore gags or details that might be integrated into a look. Also playing with things like Art Nouveau and Art Deco to see whether or not there's a nice fit for that. I also really love drawing objects. There's nothing more fun than filling a sheet of paper full of things I've observed, objects I've observed. And when you're looking at a specific theme, you start all of a sudden start noticing repeating things. Like nautical stuff is very different looking than necessarily like camping gear that you would find from the same era. So doubling down on what's unique about nautical light fixtures or nautical objects as opposed to tools or objects or lighting that's used in another for another purpose. So more concepts for potential ideas for the Eiffel Tower, as well as various props that you might find in an airport. Our story was basically we were making fun of air travel today, but through the lens of airships in the Eiffel Tower. And that includes, the gift shop where you could get neck pillows. What's the Victorian version of a neck pillow? Or what does a cafe look like in a Jules Verne inspired version of the Eiffel Tower? There's the more neck pillows, paisleys and stuff. And then the various departments that you might find in the Eiffel Tower, like there's the mail room you would pass through, and then there's playing on gags like, what would the first class food service look like as opposed to the third class food service? And we figured that the third class would get a potato on a stick for their mid-flight treat. So exploring more architecture, how do we take something as iconic as the Eiffel Tower and do something like sticking an air depot at the top of it, what that might look like, and sort of steel vernacular for that. And then more details. This is just more looking at things like Pinterest and Google Images, searching for the time period, searching depots and train stations, and seeing if there's ideas that we can glom. This is true of things like the railings. What kind of railings do we want to create? What kind of library of shapes do we want to start generating that could be used to build the finished product? And then also, what are the designs of the holes? Are there special mechanics that are unique to the design of this particular course? And we're always trying to find new ways in which for your ball to interact with the environment while also creating a shape language of what fits into the environment and the story. So not just a standalone whole design, but actually one that interacts with the environment you're in. Like standing in line in front of the ticket booth could conceivably be the design of a whole. And we also wanted to make sure that you were up in the air at sort of nosebleed heights, where you were putting from balloon to balloon. Here's just an unrelated drawing of when we were working on our Norse-themed course, Alfheim. This was to help describe to players the relationship of Alfheim and the other 9 realms of Norse mythology. And some more sketches. I've been bringing in some halftone with a sort of a Prismacolor pencil just to help pop things. Not necessarily necessary, but it helps describe the shapes and how they fit in space. So this was sort of doing research on rock climbing and those insane people who choose to sleep dangling off the side of a cliff, and these sort of glass box hotel rooms that you have to clamber down to. This was for Crystal Lair, different ways in which our maniacal, villainous crystal villain would create a spa where everything was crystal-based. So tanning beds with crystals and crystal-infused oxygen bar, you name it. And then also more graphics and depictions of our self-help crystal guru. So lots more of those, more graphics, things that could conceivably be turned into banners or books. And then furniture, and trying to come up with a furniture shape language. So everything was very, very boxy initially, or angular and pointy. So we're using shapes like this point shape a lot in the design of the environment. And then sort of spa assets too. Originally, we were calling it the eco layer and eventually landed on crystal layer. And here's more crystal-shaped, faceted versions of those spa furniture. And a lot of this is just sort of exploring shapes and ways in which those shapes can be conveyed. And this particular one was figuring out how each of the floors would work. The layer hangs off of a tepui in South America, and you work your way down from floor to floor of this sort of luxurious spa that has crystals. And then there's like things that seem like they might be unpleasant, like a geode that you could sit and meditate in, or crystals where inside you can see trapped players or people who've been frozen inside the crystal formations. And then this is work we did on Mount Olympus, and this was the sketch done in a coffee shop. And I'm always amazed at sometimes the very, very first scribble of an idea becomes the foundation, and then the finished product looks a lot like the energy that you were shooting for in those initial sort of coffee shop sketches. And then we'll dive deeply into the various details. So a lot of this stuff is selfishly done for the pure joy of putting ink on a piece of paper. I love the process of drawing. And so it's great that I have a day job that lets me do that. I don't know if you can tell that the original drawings are all done in a red pencil, a color erase pencil. And the reason I'll do that is it lets me figure out all the shapes. I'll come in and do the ink. I'll erase as much of the red as I can. And you can see that I can't get rid of all of it. And then when I scan it into the computer, I just take the red channel and then zero it out so that all I'm left with is the white paper and the black line. So that's really, really handy. So lots of exploration and to the architecture and how the various pieces work, as well as these represent the 8.5 by 11 sketches. I have other ones that are 11 by 17 or even larger that I don't have depicted here, but these are the ones that are the easiest just to throw one of these, pull this out of your bag, whether I'm at the studio or I am at a retreat and just start sketching on something standard like a regular letter-sized piece of paper. So more research, more props, more processing, what's possible, what are the various gods, Dionysus, what would be the things that are attributed to him, what are the shapes that I want to play with, and what are the things, I think more importantly, of what if you're going to go to an environment that is meant to be a tribute to Dionysus, what do you expect to see? So what can we make sure to definitely include? Hephaestus as well, there are ways in which we can treat his forge. And then we knew that we wanted to end in the sort of temple of Zeus, and there's thrones for each of the various gods whose environments you've just passed through. So playing around with the designs of those thrones. Let's see, we do try to do research for architectural types, so playing around with what's unique about the architecture of Greece during the time period that we're shooting for. What are the things that are must-haves? And also you learn things like what are things that repeat a lot, like the way in which windows are constructed are pretty much the same in all of it. The simplicity of these columns in the village area as opposed to the complexity of the columns that you find in the temples. For a while there we played with there being a Hades gateway that led to just a deep staircase that went on forever. And then working on the Mars habitat for Mars Gardens, playing with futuristic stuff, playing with what kind of equipment might be used, and are there robotics, or are there some silly vignettes that we can do that suggest the various ways in which they harvest the oversized fruit and vegetables. Playing with the idea of what one would expect in a space station, but also seeing if there's our own spin on it, more playful, maybe even cartoony version of how this technology would be depicted. And this idea that everything grew big. So on Mars, there was no limit to the size that carrots and corn and cherries. Also playing with what is the simplified low poly version of these fruits. So they're low poly, but they're still recognizable as the fruits and vegetables that we are working with. More Mars assets. Just having a ball. The idea of using a space suit as a scarecrow seemed funny. And then also using design patterns to see whether or not the design of the crops could help the landscape of the environment so that it felt fun and designed. And then more. This is probably my favorite stuff, is coming up with just gag moments. There was a period in my career where during the course of your career, you might fantasize being the head of a project. And at one point, I was the head art director responsible for working on Dragon's Land for Epic Universe. And so I had artists working underneath the producer and I, but I found that I ended up not having any time to draw at all. I worked with the marvelous sort of unsung Disney legend Tim Kirk on Dragon's Land, and he would sit in the morning. He would show up. He would sit at a table, and then he would just generate the most amazing drawings. And if there needed to be an alteration to a concept, he would just put the first concept aside and draw onto the next one, always bringing his sense of humor and his style to everything that we worked on. And I remember thinking, I'm jealous. I wish I could do that. And every time that there was something that I wanted to design, it meant that I was taking that project away from one of the other artists that was working on the project. So I kind of live now in a place where I get to produce as many drawings as I like, but I also get to put a hard hat on, a virtual one that is, and dive in and be a part of the production as well. So more concepts. This is for a 1980s 8-bit villain who was digitizing everything, turning physical things into into pixels, and all the various inventions that he had created to turn living things into bits. And eventually the game sends you to the digital realm where you fight our villain, who is a boss, giant boss version. Here's some exploring what that villain might look like. He's sort of a petulant trust fund kid who has more money and love of computer games in the 80s than sense. And some of this stuff just nothing went with. It just is playing with ideas that didn't go anywhere. But they might have sparked other ideas later on in the process. Here you can actually see even more of that red line. I've even got a cubed grid underneath it just so I can not have to think about perspective. It's all kind of done for me. I just draw over the top of it. And little bits of tech as initially the idea was that he invented virtual reality and then decided it was a lost cause and then went off to digitize things instead. Why go into the digital world with your eyes when you could go in there with your body? And more concepts for graphics, things that Zach could play with, use, or then let it inspire another direction he wanted to go in. So here's exploring the hang in there, and then maybe it would be better if we did a more pixelated 8-bit version of hang in there. More graphics. These are actually drawings for the whiteboards in the various conference rooms and laboratories. And once again, some more, what's the shape language of the furniture? Initially, we played with this idea of that sort of the 80s swoop, kind of the Pee Wee Herman furniture design, and then working things like Rubik's Cubes and 20-sided die and elements like that into the design so that it was a subtle thing, but it was all reminiscent of the world of the 8-bit, playing with interfaces that remind us of consoles that were around at the time, and even the pizzas were square. And this idea of the digitizing, bringing stuff from the physical world, being sucked into this portal that eventually will suck us into the digital realm. We worked with the Elvis estate on creating an Elvis-themed course. They were wonderful to work with. They really were happy with us to just sort of give a playful look at Elvis's career and sort of early Vegas while in this sort of dreamlike space and environment. So we got to do a lot of research of Las Vegas during the 60s and early 70s, and ways in which to depict the gambling apparatus, but in a fun way, and centerpiece for this virtual dreamlike casino, and then playing with scale. So at one point you're on a giant jukebox and you're playing on the surface of the spinning records. And some, environmental sketches of, we knew we had a dressing room environment, so take the roof off and try to figure out what the arrangement of the various pieces might be. We also had a dreamlike version of Jailhouse Rock, where the sort of iron bars of this multi-story prison were neon, glowing in our black void dreamlike space, and a studio where they're filming a beach film or a Hawaii themed Elvis film, and the big stage banquet hall showroom where you come through the Elvis letters. And then also playing with stylizing the various one-armed bandit slot machines and the theming that might happen on those. And then lots of iconic things like the Elvis Wedding Chapel. We wanted to make sure that was there, but we also wanted to break it apart like a dream landscape. So although there's a suggestion of a tower, these stones are actually floating in space, just as these rooftop pieces are. Then the vertical pieces are actually neon structures. And then even getting down into the details like the neon along the edges of the of the holes. So anyway, I could go on and show you more. There's still lots more, and this is probably only half of the stuff I've been doing at Walkabout. But mostly I just wanted to talk about the fact that this is the fun part. This is the part that you get paid to play, and you get to explore and research and eventually use your drawing skills as a means of communicating ideas to your team. In fact, here's that. That should have been the first, but this is the scribble sketch I did literally at a coffee shop when we were talking about doing an Elvis course. And then some of the graphics, which we turned into neon. Anyway, so that's it for now. Let me know if you want to see more or hear more about concept drawing, its use, its value, having a good time while doing it, not worrying about bad ideas. If you feel strongly about something, draw it and depict it. Sometimes words aren't enough when you're trying to describe something you have in your head, and they may not sell the idea to the people that you're working with, but when they finally see the drawing version of it, they might go, oh, I see, I understand. No, I understand now. That's a wonderful idea. And also it's used to help pre-build. You're not only exploring the various styles of, in this case, Japanese exterior light fixtures and water features and tools, but also it's starting me thinking about how this would be built. So two of the greatest compliments I've gotten in my 40 years of career, one was that a producer said what he liked about my work was he could see the thinking in it. And that's a huge goal of mine, is I want the drawings to communicate as best as possible the ideas in my head. And then the second compliment about the same time was that they liked my drawings because they were buildable. And a lot of that is because I really do work really hard to make sure that what I'm drawing works in 3D space. We'll build a rough, very, very rough rudimentary model like in SketchUp, and then I'll use that as the underdrawing. It makes sure that I know that what I'm drawing is going to work and scale in the world that it's going to be experienced in. It will have a back, not just this 3/4 side view. And it also, I know this is going to fit in the space where it's supposed to be. And then I don't have to worry about things like perspective. It's all kind of figured out underneath it. So whether or not it's a structure or a fun building like these restrooms that are built in a log, or exploring graphics. And I'm always trying to see if there's a way to bring humor into the experience. This allows for people who stumble upon these to sort of finish the punchline or get the joke, or that also it's saying that we're not too serious. Yeah, it's a fun thing. It's a fun job. And I love this part, this sort of early exploring designs and early ideas for everything from buildings to merchandise to plants and graphics. And then especially since I'm going to be building the very first versions of a lot of these things, it's nice to get a leg up on just the job of having to create all these things by doing a pass that involves sketching it first. And in the case of this particular one, I built the room, I built a lot of the props, but I didn't end up filling out this space. Our art team did that and did a fantastic job. And I think with luck, a sketch like this does the job of telling them what I had in mind as far as the layout of the environment. So anyway, more to come if you're interested. Otherwise, I would say go out if you like sketching, sketch all the time. Give yourself permission to use your drawings as a way to explore your ideas, and know that anything that you put on paper is going to help your team better understand the pictures in your head than probably any other thing you could give them. So thanks for following along.